Pretty much everything was in the toilet, except, I did show up to work.
But was it at that point where the Czars sort of finished and you had this idea, well, I have a lot of things that I want to improve or get better at. Was it something that you were eager to try at that point, or were you sort of fed up with, because I read that you were fed up with music at that point?
Yeah, I was fed up with the music scene, so I quit for a while. I moved to New York for 3 years in Brooklyn. And during that time, the Midlake boys started asking me to come and make my solo album. And I wasn't sure because I'd started doing other things,
What kind of things were that?
Well, I was doing the Russian interpreting in New York. I did 2 years of to get a certificate in Russian medical interpreting. So you do like you go to the hospital and interpret for doctors and patients.
But were you happy that at that point that you still had that education behind you, that you could pick up on that, or was it like a sort of you had no other choice at that point?
Well, I was tired of waiting tables, and I had been recovering from alcoholism and drug addiction for a few years at that point. Well, just 2 years, I guess. Or maybe it was a year and a half. I don't remember. But so I never really did anything with my languages, But I always kept up my knowledge of the languages, and I'd been waiting tables the whole time. So I've been waiting tables for 13 years.
But during your addiction as well, so that
Yeah.
was. But how severe was your addiction? Was it like you were unmanageable, or you could still?
I could function pretty well. So I was what they would call a functioning addict. I could go to work, but that was about it. My financial life was a wreck. My personal life was a wreck. Pretty much everything was in the toilet, except I did show up to work, and towards the end it got more and more difficult. I would always give up my shifts, so I would sometimes I would only work 2 times a week, because I would let other people have my shifts so that I wouldn't have to deal with it.
But can you remember, was there maybe a specific happening or that made you all of a sudden want to quit, or was that something that so maybe an occasion?
It was really nothing specific. I do remember one day I was going to the hospital, and I was going to check myself into a rehab clinic where they give you this drug called Antabuse, so that when you drink, it makes you sick. And they were doing STD testing for free in the waiting room there. And it turned out that one of the nurses looked at my arms, and I had this rash on my arms, and she said to me, "Have you ever been tested for syphilis?" And I was like, "No." She said, "Well, I think you should, And so I did it, and I had it, and they treated me right away with penicillin. But it sort of started me thinking, everything was a wreck. Everything was a wreck in my head. I had syphilis, so I had been sleeping around with whoever, just to sort of escape how I was feeling, and I felt dirty and sick, and I talked to the nurse that day. It turned out that she was a recovering alcoholic, and we got into a conversation about that, and it was, it was a really painful day, because you're finding out all these really horrible things and realizing that and I had gone to the emergency room 3 times with cocaine problems with my heart, and I just knew that if I didn't do something to change, I was probably going to die, and I wasn't ready to die yet.